Imagine being at an airport, following every rule correctly, prepared for an important flight, when suddenly, without any valid reason, you are treated with suspicion, interrogated in a humiliating way, and denied boarding. Now imagine this happens to you simply because the people around you don't believe you are who you say you are. That's exactly what happened to Miara O'Neal, the daughter of basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal. What was supposed to be a simple trip to a basketball tournament turned into a public embarrassment and an infuriating case of discrimination. But the airport staff had no idea about the huge mistake they were making. Because when Shaq found out what had happened to his daughter, he did something that changed everything, something that made those employees deeply regret their actions. Miara O'Neal, at just 17 years old, already carried a legendary last name. Her father was one of the greatest basketball players of all time, but she didn't want to live only under his shadow. She had her own talent, and on the court, she was proving to the world that she had the skills, determination, and passion to carve her own path in the sport. On that day, she was traveling to a very important tournament. She woke up early, packed her bags, and left home feeling excited. This tournament was a huge opportunity, a chance to compete against some of the best young players in the country. On the way to the airport, she exchanged texts with her friends and coach, who were already waiting at the destination. Her father, busy with professional commitments, couldn't travel with her, but that wasn't a problem. Miara was independent and had traveled alone before. Dressed in a comfortable hoodie, training pants, and sports sneakers, she looked like any other teenager. But there was one thing about her that made her stand out: her height. At 6'4", 193, she was hard to miss. As she arrived at the airport, she rolled her suitcase behind her and walked confidently toward the check-in counter. The place was buzzing with activity. Long lines of passengers, announcements echoing through the speakers, and the constant sound of rolling luggage filling the air. When it was finally her turn, she stepped forward, smiled politely, and handed her passport to the airline agent. The employee, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, took the passport and began inspecting it. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he narrowed his eyes, that immediately told Miara something was wrong. He looked up at her, examining her face carefully, then back at the passport. "What is your destination?" he asked, his voice flat and emotionless. Miara responded casually, not thinking much of it. "Are you traveling alone?" She nodded, wondering why that mattered. The employee then picked up a radio and muttered something to a colleague. He looked at her again, this time with a more skeptical expression. "How old are you?" Miara frowned slightly. Why was he asking that? 17. "Who purchased your ticket?" At this point, she was starting to feel uncomfortable. "My father." The employee's eyes narrowed even further. It was clear now. He didn't believe her. He exchanged a quick glance with another worker beside him, as if silently communicating doubts about her identity. Miara felt her stomach tighten. She had experienced moments before where people doubted that she was Shaq's daughter. Sometimes people found it hard to believe that someone so young could be traveling alone, or that she could belong to such a famous family. But never had it turned into a serious issue. Until now. Without further explanation, the employee called a supervisor. A few minutes later, a man in a dark suit arrived and took her passport. He examined it slowly, as if looking for something suspicious. "Are you sure this is your passport?" he asked, his voice cold and doubtful. Miara's eyes widened. "Of course it's mine. Why would I lie about that?" The supervisor didn't seem convinced. "We have strict security protocols. We need to verify some information." And then they said something to her that was absolutely shocking. "You will not be allowed to board this flight." The words hit Miara like a punch to the gut. "What, why?" The supervisor simply shook his head. "I'm sorry, miss. There is an issue with your identification." Miara's heart started pounding. She looked around and noticed that several people were watching. Some were even pulling out their phones to record the situation. She tried to explain. She told them she had traveled alone before, that her father was Shaquille O'Neal, and that everything was in order. but no one seemed willing to listen. The airport staff had already made up their minds. They had assumed she was lying. Her frustration reached its peak. She pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to her father. "Dad, they're not letting me board. They said there's a problem with my documents, but they won't explain anything." She had no idea what was about to happen next. Less than 30 minutes later, the atmosphere in the airport completely changed. Employees whispered among themselves, stealing nervous glances toward the entrance. Passengers started looking around, sensing that something unusual was happening. And then he arrived. Shaquille O'Neal, towering at 7'1", 2.60 meters, with a commanding presence, he strode into the airport like a man on a mission. The employees, who had so easily dismissed Mayara earlier, were suddenly uneasy. Without hesitation, Shaq walked straight to the check-in counter.
"Where is my daughter?"
Silence fell over the area. Mayara, feeling both relieved and frustrated, got up from the chair where she had been forced to wait and rushed to his side. Shaq turned his intense gaze toward the employees. "What's going on here?" His voice was deep and serious. The check-in agent swallowed hard. The supervisor, who had seemed so sure of himself moments ago, suddenly looked nervous. Well, there was a problem with her identification. Shaq folded his arms across his massive chest. A problem? What kind of problem? The supervisor hesitated. He knew he didn't have a good answer. After a long, awkward silence, the airport manager was called. And after a quick investigation, the truth became clear. There was no problem with Mayara's documents. It had all been a mistake rooted in unfair assumptions and bias. Shaq wasn't about to let it slide. He took to social media, exposing the entire situation. The response was immediate. The story went viral. Within hours, thousands of fans, athletes, and celebrities condemned the airport's actions. The backlash was brutal. "This is unacceptable. Imagine how many others have gone through this who don't have a famous father to step in." The airport administration had no choice but to issue a public apology. And the employee responsible, he was investigated and later fired. As for Mayara, she boarded the next flight, this time with VIP treatment. This incident was a powerful reminder that no one should be treated with disrespect, no matter who they are. And as for those airport employees, they learned the hard way that messing with the O'Neal family comes with serious consequences. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful content.